Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Precious Metal Gents. This is episode 13. I'm Zan here with Brian. And tonight, our main event, we've got a brand new 90s collector. He's not a brand new card collector, but he's a brand new 90s collector. Matt, he will be joining us later in the show for a little bit of a conversation about his collecting history and why he decided to get into 90s and kind of the approach he's been taking thus far. But before we get into that, we're going to run through a little bit. Full disclosure, no mail days today, so we won't be spending any time on that. But before we get into card of the week and listener questions, we felt it was incumbent upon us to at least briefly discuss the duplicate issue that's been plaguing the hobby for a couple of weeks on these 90s cards, and in particular, two particular cards. The first, 1999 Precious Metal Gems Barry Bonds card, one on auction at MC Sports Cards, the other on auction at Fanatics Collect Weekly. One's a PSA 7, one's a PSA 8, and that would not be unusual but for the fact that they are both serial numbered 1 out of 50. Both have closed already. The 8 ended for around 11,000 and the 7 ended for around 7,000. So about a $4,000 gap there. But it was unusual to see two cards with the same serial number. And then about a week later, we saw on Premiere a 1998 Peyton Manning Ultra Masterpiece Series 2, where he's in the Colts uniform, which also turns out to be a duplicate, and a bit of a more expensive duplicate than the Barry Bonds. But since we learned of that information, one person on Instagram who had both of them originally has come out and posted that he had one of them cracked out of the Beckett slab and autographed in person by Peyton Manning, which kind of puts an end to the issue of there being duplicates. And now we really only have one in circulation, though we don't know which one is pack pulled. So a couple of situations here that have been a bit confusing and maybe worrisome, especially to the people that have bidding on them. Brian, what do you think about the Manning, the Bonds, both, or just the situation generally?
Well, there's definitely a difference between these duplicates, hence why I use the term duplicate as opposed to like a backdoor copy, because when you think of like multiple copies of, like, just say like the PMGs, we referenced, I think it was the Thurman Thomas, was it the green that had the exact same serial number out there? That's
Right.
not a duplicate. So like we have to draw a very, very big line between this scenario and those, because that's an actual like backdoor copy where someone took a card that was never put in a pack, they cut it out of a sheet, they put a fake stamp serial number on it, and then they try to pass it off as the real legit one, where we found the actual real one was sold as well. So you can see a distinct difference. These cards that we're talking about, the Bonds and the Payne Manning, they're both legit cards. One, in fact, was pulled out of a pack for sure. The other copy, or in other terms, some other types of cards, there's multiple duplicates. Those are generally created by the company as replacement copies, or in other scenarios where the company holds on to them, and then for one reason or another, they make their way out of the factory, whether by an employee, or they're given to an executive, or they're given as a replacement for. I don't know. I don't really know exactly how they get out, but one's not from a pack. But they are legit cards stamped by, as far as we know, stamped by the company. Now, like, I have a card from a set that I didn't even really know that there are multiples out of. I know I've heard of this scenario well before this, but even this year I picked up a Favre one of one on 1998 showcase parallel, where there's no known duplicate as far as I know of the Favre, but of other players in the set, primarily the Steve McNair has like 3 known copies out there that all look the same, and no one really knows which one was pulled out of the pack and which ones were brought out of the factory in other ways. But there's nothing like altered about the cards, or anything that's like mischievous in terms of like doing something to the card that wasn't originally intended by the company. It's just a really strange scenario when you see, like you said, when you see multiple bonds sell at like the exact time, which is really strange. This one doesn't, one is out of circulation because you said it was, it was signed, and we know the owner isn't going to move it. The other one was sold, so it really just comes down to the buyer. If it's like something that would bother you, that that these other cards of the one that you just purchased, the one of one, is in circulation. But I think what everybody needs to understand is that any one of one that you get, whether it's like even now out of like Prism or NT or whatever, or especially in the 90s, like there are multiples of that card. There's not they're replacement copies. If one came out of the pack damaged, you can send it in and get a new one sent to you. The company does have multiple copies. They also send like demos or exact copies of the card to I guess the league has to verify and authorize cards. So I mean, there are other copies that aren't intended to get out. Now there's probably better quality control with companies now like Panini stuff. That's kind of funny I said that because there are issues with quality control with companies now. But in terms of like cards leaving the factory, I think there's a lot that has been done to prevent that. So you don't see as much of that now. But just know, like your Black Finite 101s, like there's multiples of that card. If you pull one out of a Topps pack, which a lot of those things are damaged, in years past, they send you a new one, and there's a reason why they can send it to you, because they make multiple copies of it. So that's really where we're at with it. It really comes down to the buyer and how much you care and how it impacts you, knowing that there's other copies out there.
And we've seen, the same person who owned both Manning masterpieces at one point, who got the second one autographed, has both Brady 2000 Legacy masterpieces or Flair Showcase masterpieces as well, one of which is also autographed. So 2 from that set. There's 2 Ray Lewis's from that set. We know, we've seen those. The bonds, I'm a little, maybe, I don't know if I would say concerned about, but there seems to be more disagreement on that, because with the masterpieces and the one of ones, you anticipate that there's a second copy because it's a backup copy, typically a damage replacement copy that maybe gets out during the bankruptcy sale, especially since Ultra and those 2000 cards are both, all 3 of those are Fleer cards. But with the bonds, there's 50 copies, and so you wonder, well, maybe it is a damage replacement copy, but there seems to be some disagreement on this topic. Now, PSA graded both bonds cards, both numbered 1 out of 50. The serials do not look the same as each other, but generally speaking, the fonts look pretty close, but there is disagreement. I mean, on Blowout, for instance, BOTA, Blowout Detective Agency, they seem to believe there's conflicting opinions. Some believe the PSA 7 is real. Some believe the PSA 8 is real. PSA says both are real. And so it's unclear to me. Now, with a card out of 50, I'd be maybe more concerned about it. But at the same time, it doesn't seem to be a rampant issue the same way that we see with the 97 Reds and Greens, where they come out all the time with, similar serials, like we've seen multiple issues out with the Thomas, the Joey Galloway. There's been others. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's not necessarily a fake card. The bonds is probably not fake just based on the stamp. It's too good on both of them. But, it is something to consider, at least if you're spending 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand even on one of these cards. Does it matter to you? And at the end of the day, I don't think that there's really one way to answer that question. But it is interesting, especially, like, I think if we found out that there was a Favre 24 karat that had the same serial number as one of ours, I'd be a little bit concerned about that. But I doubt that would. I doubt that. I've never seen that with that set, so maybe it wouldn't be as big an issue.
I'd probably want the replacement one because the number on mine is jacked up until the 3 is almost touching the hub. So if they have a
Just
replacement, you
yeah,
can just send it my way. I'll take it.
send for free, for free.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just weird that both of these kind of hit at the same time. Both bonds have closed. The Manning ends, I believe, this week. So be interested to see where that ends. And speaking of Peyton Manning, I think that goes nicely into our card of the week showcase, which was a 1998 Metal Universe Precious Metal Gems Peyton Manning rookie card, graded PSA 10, which sold on August 18th, 2024 for a best offer of $100,000. That card is a Pop 2. And interestingly enough, there are also two BGS 95s. And so the 210s and the 295s have all sold within the past year, which is very strange. All four have sold publicly. So we have this most recent PSA 10 sale of 100,000. The prior PSA 10 sale was last June in 2023 for 42,000. So we see a huge jump there. The two BGS 95 sold earlier this year for 26 grand and 28 grand, roughly, on Premiere in January and February. So we're looking at three sales, the past three sales of 42, 28, 26, and then this boom, 100,000. So do you think this is similar to the Favre 24 karat type of thing that we talked about, where one person saw and just said, like, fuck it, the other three Gem Mint copies have sold, I'm going to go for this one? A response to the 98 Credentials Future sale. I mean, I don't think most people, I don't think this card is actually quote unquote worth 100,000, right? What do you make of it?
Well, I think we've seen enough of these sales over the past like couple of months where you have like they go crazy compared to what the last sales were. That we can put into effect that regardless if that card sold for actually for 100, like let's say it sold for, I don't know, the last sale was 42, let's say it sold for like 65. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We would still be sitting here saying like, oh wow, that's a high sale, it beat the last sale by 20 some $1,000, and it does that show like strength in that market, and like all these cards when they come up they're just going to continue to break the last one? Like we'd still be saying the same thing. I think we're a little more shocked at like the price because you just wouldn't expect it to go for more than 2x in that short period of time. Like what made that card, that basically that exact card, worth more than 2x what it last sold for? Like nothing happened in the Peyton Manning market, as far as I know, that really, triggered that. It's, sometimes you'll see stuff like that if the player passes away or something. Obviously, Peyton Manning's alive and well, doing great. And it's like, there's nothing that really happened in that market. So you just combine that with all these other sales of like the Favre and some other cards where I just think like it would have outsold the last one regardless. I think like and I've said this before, like every time these cards sell, I feel like the person is just going to be like, well, I might not see another one for a while, so I'm going to have to outbid the last one. And it just makes the price go up. I'm not saying it's worth that. I'm not saying that's always going to do that, but I think in the short term, at least right now, these cards, as they come up, people are just going to try to outbid the last one. And this person was just like, screw it, I'm gonna just pay this much and just make sure I get the thing. I don't know. I mean, I'm not even gonna mess with it. Like sometimes maybe the guy was just like, I'm not gonna play around with offers and that. Maybe the guy will just stop talking to me, or we've seen that too, where sellers will just stop talking to you if you think that they're lowballing them. And maybe the guy thought it was a good price. I don't know, based on everything else. A lot of factors, but I think in the end, it was going to go up anyway.
Yeah, I think it was going to go up. My concern is really the platform that it sold on, which was Fanatics Collect, which we've talked about. And I have a general distrust for some of the prices that we see coming off of that platform. Now, I think that when you make an offer, there's an automatic processing to that payment. But I'd like to know, I hope someone reveals that he or she was the buyer, because that will sort of validate the sale to me. Otherwise, I don't really know. I'm not saying it's impossible that someone paid $100,000, but it just seems like a huge overpay. And maybe like you said, that it's one of those things where the 10 and the other 295 sold within recent history. So this was really the last one left of the gem mints, if you really wanted that, to pay up for it. And maybe this person just has enough money where it doesn't really matter. They can pay 2.5x the last sale. But I just, with the run of these other big cards like the Favre cards that we've talked about going for so much higher than we suspected, it starts to get into bubble territory with these prices, which is like this is not sustainable for sure. It's almost like we need a PSA 8 to come to auction again to really show what this thing is should be trading at. And I would guess it'd be closer to that 40 to 50 range, maybe 60, like you said. But I wouldn't look at this sale and say, okay, that PSA 10 is now worth $100,000. I would say someone was willing to pay for that, and that it was not representative of the Manning market, not representative of the card. There's 50 copies of that, and we've talked about it. I mean, we don't think it's like his best card, but now it's his second highest selling rookie. So, I wouldn't pay, I don't know about you, I wouldn't pay 3 to 4x his 24 karat for this card just because PSA 10, but somebody did. So, unusual, I would say, but I don't think we've seen the last of these types of huge sales. So we'll have to keep checking that out. We've got a couple of listener questions this week. The first one comes from Drake's PC. I ask you this, Brian. It is, what is a 90s inspired insert or parallel that was used in a later product that you think looks better than the original? And I guess I don't think it has to be exactly the same, but I mean, maybe Drake means something that was heavily influenced by an earlier product or an earlier parallel, earlier insert that you think was just done better the second time around.
The most obvious one for me is I think Prism Golds look better than really any. I'm thinking before I say that. I would say, let's say the vast majority of gold refractors of really any brand. I think Prism Gold, at least years maybe 2012 through 2016, I'd say. I think they look better. The shine, just some of the different types of patterns and borders and aesthetics that they've put on those cards, I think look better than just the way that a lot of the Topps Chrome, the Bowman Chrome, and even the Finest did gold refractors in the past. Now, obviously, there's years and stuff of gold refractors that I think are awesome. I love the 99 Finest golds. I think those are super underrated. But just as a whole, I think Prism took a lot of those parallels from the Topps products and just made them look better. And I don't think it's even, to me, it's not even like debatable. For example, like I love the Finest mosaics out of 10. We know that I've talked about them a number of times on this show. But if you take that mosaic pattern and you put it on a black finite, regardless of the 101, I think like a lot of the years of black finite look better than even the Finest mosaic. So like even the mosaic pattern in general, and that's not the Finest mosaics aren't the first time they use mosaic pattern, but just take the mosaic pattern in general and you put it on like how Panini did it, I think it looks better. I'll even argue that, I love superfractors and I love the early ones, especially the Braun that I bought. I think there's something different about that Braun, but I just think they got kind of lazy with it. And then Panini, I think the gold vinyl I think a lot of the gold vinyls look better than, maybe not like to Drake's question, the first year of the pattern, but it's not. It's definitely better than most years. I just think that overall, to answer the question, I think Panini has done a better job with those, especially those three parallels, than some of the early representations of them.
Yeah, for as much as flack as they get, and maybe we give them sometimes, Panini has done some really not innovative, but they've recreated or been inspired by past things that have actually held up and done pretty well. My favorite is well, going back to the 90s, 97, 98, and 2000. Um, 97, 98, and 2000 in baseball, 97 and 2000 in football, and then some combination of those in basketball. Topps Gallery did a Gallery of Heroes insert, which was not hard to find. You could go on eBay, find them. Great looking cards. But they incorporated that stained glass concept, which was really nice. If you hold them up to the light, that you could see through them, but they're still a little murky. And then Panini, in 2017, I believe, started the stained glass insert in Prism. That's Mahomes' rookie year. He's got a stained glass. And I think they did it for 17, 18. And then to me, the best year was 2020, which is a horizontal landscape. I used to actually owned an Aaron Rodgers of that. And it's probably maybe the best looking card I've owned, I think, is that 2020 stained glass. And the colors pop. The design is really nice. They did it in 2021 in a vertical layout, which is really nice. And the inserts expanded into mosaic for basketball. And now there's a mosaic stained glass. I can't keep them straight, but the 2020 stained glass in football, to me, was, I think, the best insert that Panini has done. It was I believe, 1 in 5 cases. It's not like Downtowns or Kabooms that you can find in every retail blaster. It was hobby exclusive, very difficult to find. Herbert and Burrow and rookie years. So great insert. I really love that. Love that reinterpretation.
Do you ever see the 20? That's funny you mentioned the Rodgers. Do you ever see the 2018 Prism stained glass gold mojo?
I like both of those. Yeah, I like both the 17, 18. That's true. That's a good point. They had the gold and the black. 2020 was just had the insert. There was no parallel version of that.
I think I want to find this card. The 2018 Prism stained glass gold mojo Rodgers is, like, to me, it's like one of his best looking cards, and it's super underrated. And having that gold in there, I mean, it's crazy. If you're listening to this, look it up. Just look it up on TCDB or past sales. I think you probably find one, but that's a crazy card. I didn't even think of the stained glass. It's a good thing to bring up too. I mean, here's another one. Some would argue that, like, the 98 and 99 essential credentials is better than the 97. I'm always partial to the 97 just because I just remember as a kid, it's cool, it's original to me. But, like, I mean, there's no doubt that, like, the 98, I think technically, if you put them side to side, I think the 98 looks better, especially when you get, like, the color matches and stuff like the Favre. I mean, regardless of the value and the rarity, like, I would take that 98 Favre the now over the way that the 97 looks, without a doubt.
For sure. Yeah, I think you're right on point there. Another one I would bring up is the kind of what we talked about with the 97 Legacy Row Zero, and then also the early Bowman's Best Atomics, which is that kind of that dot pattern. I think Panini has done that really well with the white sparkles. They've done it with the Select Cosmic, and really improved that. So Cosmic is almost using that pattern on a nebula, which is really cool looking. So I think there's definitely some great things that Panini has done that we will probably be seeking 20 years from now. But it all traces back to the 90s.
All right, here's a longer one from Cardboard Insights. It says, it seems that a lot of the great sets, like PMGs, Credentials, Rubies, rightfully deserve their critical acclaim, yet many other sets may in fact be rare, fall to the wayside because of the lack of knowledge or haven't yet caught on. Curious to hear your thoughts on the rise of set prominence in the hobby, and if perhaps why there is such a disparity on the pricing sides for cool and rare sets. So an example that he gives is the had a good conversation on IG a few weeks ago about the Favre Atlantitude Warp Tech out of 4 in light of the Credentials out of 4 sales. So he was comparing the two, one's out of 4, they're both out of 4, and you see the disparity between the sale prices.
Right. So, for those of you listening that are unfamiliar, the Atlantitude was an insert set in 99 Skybox Dominion. 15 card insert set. Everybody was numbered to every card, or each player's card was numbered to his jersey number. So Favre had 4 copies. It's the Warp Tech finish, which is a little bit hard to describe. It almost has like a vinyl feel. If you ever seen the 2000 Min insert, that has that same kind of finish to it. I don't know that's, to me, just because it's out of 4, like the Credentials, I don't think that's a representative parallel. It's not like Brian and I were talking before the show, that the basis or the name derivation of that set is because in 99 Super Bowl was here in Atlanta, Rams Titans. But if the guy didn't play in the Super Bowl, like what significance does that have? Like Favre wasn't in that game, so does it really have much of a significance for him? Not really. And I think there's other sets that you'll find, parallels that you'll find out of products maybe that are made by Collector's Edge or Pacific or whatever, that may be really short printed. Even one of ones, Clear Focus, for instance, one of ones that will not hold their prices, will not have prices that are very high. But just because I think their print runs are low doesn't mean that I think they'll catch up to some of these acclaimed sets. But I do think, like we've talked about on past episodes, there are certain sets that are what we might consider, quote unquote pivot sets, in that they were highly acclaimed at release, and they probably will catch up. And like 97 Platinum Gold, 2000 Legacies, maybe Crusade Reds in football, that kind of thing. So I think there are tiers to the set prominence, where tier 1, if you're looking at the PMG's, Credentials, Rubies, the prices are, matching up to the hype level, and they're very high. And then you get to the lower tiers that have a chance, like the ones I just mentioned, 97 Platinum Gold set. They're a tier below, but they have a chance to be in tier 1 over time. But then you have cards like maybe the Atlantitude or other parallels that, I think like Contenders 99. Finesse Golds are at a 25. Contenders is a big product, but you have problems with that set. There's the rusting issue. There's the fact that it just really hasn't ever taken off. Maybe because the aesthetic's limited and it's kind of hit or miss. I've had them. I've had several and kind of moved on from after a while. People get tired of them. So I think there are tiers that have low number parallels, but I just don't think they'll ever hit the level of some of those more revered sets. So I do think like there's room for growth for some, but I don't think that just because something's low number that it's going to necessarily become more respected or more desired in the future.
Yeah, it's like, if we're going off of aesthetics, if you look at that card and you look at the price that it goes for and you look at some others, should it be higher? Probably. Like, you said there's room for growth with it. Will it probably eventually get more appreciated and get a little boost? It could, most likely. But I think one of the big things, and I told, I responded to Cardboard Insights because he messaged me about it too. And I said, I think one of the main factors, not the reason why there's such a disparity between the price. So just forget about the price, but just the fact that it maybe would be less valuable or less revered by collectors. we notice that like with insert sets, especially in the 90s, when there's parallels of the inserts, especially when there's multiple parallels of an insert set, it never really seems to sell like a parallel of the base set. So when we think of parallels, at least with me, and I know like a lot of other collectors do the same, like parallels of the base set are the keys that a lot of people focus on. Inserts are kind of separate and they're secondary. So like with this Atlanitude set, you have the Atlanitude, which is inserted, just the Atlanitude base insert, which is inserted 1 out of 24 packs. Then you have the Atlanitude Plus, which is inserted 1 out of 240 packs, getting more rare. And the difference between the two is the Atlanitude Plus has like a, I don't know, it's like a gold finish on it or like a shinier finish. It's more of like a refractor kind of from what I'm seeing. I've never actually had one in hand, but it looks like a refractor finish. Might be wrong on that. I don't know. And then the Atlantude Warp Tech is obviously like you described, that Warp Tech pattern. And that's the jersey number 1. So you got 3 parallels or 2 parallels in the insert set, which is already short printed or inserted 1 out of 24 packs. And you would think, yeah, well, that just makes it more rare. Shouldn't it be worth more? Well, not necessarily, because a lot of people, a lot of collectors, collecting is driven, hype and collector desire drives prices. We've established that in tons of different markets and that. So when it comes to that type of stuff, it's what collectors are focused on. That's why you see these huge fluctuations with different sets and parallels and things like that, because collectors move around and they focus on certain things, and that drives prices. Well, like with this, collectors typically focus on parallels of the base set. Yeah, they might see this and think, yeah, that's a cool card, and that might drive like an initial price or two or initial sale, because they're like, maybe scrolling on eBay and like, ooh, that thing kind of looks like a jambalaya, or it looks like a, you know what I'm saying? It's a cool looking card, and they might just hit bin on it. Now that price is set. This card's out of 4. So now when is another one going to sell? So it's just that the scarcity can also hurt the price if they don't sell enough. And if it doesn't get enough collector love, like, they're focusing mainly on the base stuff, the parallels of the base set, that might also impact prices.
Yeah, it's a great point about the inserts. It's just, especially in football, 90s football, inserts just, I mean, they are not the big chase. And mainly because a lot of them aren't numbered. There's some great looking inserts, platinum portraits. We talked about Hot Hands, Destination Honolulu. I mean, number of them that we could go through. But there are very few that are numbered, and that are numbered and desired. I mean, you can, Playmakers Theater comes to mind as being the biggest Crusade Reds. But then beyond that, there's not a whole lot that stand out. I mean, I really like Star Power and 2000 Men, but you really, with inserts, they're just never going to carry the same weight and collector desirability as the parallel. So cards like that, the Atlanitude, probably doesn't have a whole lot of room for growth. But we have a guest who is here to talk about his journey into 90s cards. Matt, this is a great conversation. Hope you guys enjoy it and take something away from it, whether you are a new collector or a veteran collector. All right, we are here with Matt on Instagram. He is at 504_person with 2 S's. Matt, thanks so much for joining us today. I know this is your very first podcast, and we're honored that you chose to be a part of ours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pretty excited to be on with y'all tonight and see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, we are too, and I think this will be great for our listeners who we've had guests on that have been in 90s for a bit, but someone who's collected cards but is just getting into 90s is going to be, I think, a tremendous help. So tell us a little bit about your background in collecting, where you started, how it developed over time, and then kind of what you were collecting up until you broke into the 90s.
Yeah, so ever since I can remember, I was collecting cards. My dad and I would collect cards growing up, either going to card shops in Metairie in New Orleans, Louisiana, or going to flea markets, or what do they call it? Antique shops. And we would just collect sets. And so we tried to get every card of a set. And we had every football and every baseball set from 1978 to 1993. And that's where we stopped. And he would go on road trips with my mom and pick up his vintage cards that he liked. And I'd pick up Shaq and all the Saints and Ben McDonald on the side. So that's how it all kind of started for me. And we just have a good time with that, trying to build out our binders with all the sets.
And did you kind of stop collecting for a period of time, or did you come back to it at any point, and when was that?
Yeah, so probably 93, 94, stopped collecting, got into junior high school, college, didn't really collect. And then 2020, 2021, when the pandemic hit, I was house sitting for my parents while they were out on vacation somewhere. And I had my buddy Brandon over, and he goes, Matt, cards are really coming back. They're a thing. Remember that binder of Mickey Mantles that your dad used to have? Do you think he still has that? And do you know where they were? And I said, yeah, I know exactly where they are. We want to see what's still left over in them. So we went and checked, and my buddy Brandon always jokes that my dad would always show him the first page of the binder, and it was all Mickey Mantles, and he wouldn't show him anything else. He's like, you can't touch it. It's on a lock and key. So I knew where it was in his safe and in his locker, and we went into it, and we spent probably from about 7 o'clock that night to about 3 or 4 in the morning looking at all the cards he had and pricing them all out. And we were like, holy crap, look at all these cards. So we thought we were going to be rich and get back into it. And so we made like a spreadsheet of what we thought all the sets and all the cards were worth and presented it to my dad and was like, hey, this is what we think we could sell these cards for. If we do all the work, could we get 10% each? And he said, yeah, go for it. Of course, at the time, we thought it was going to be $300,000. It didn't even come anywhere near that. He didn't have exactly what we thought he was going to have. He did have 2 or 3 or 4 pages of Mickey Mantles, but the rest were all sporadic and full sets of 78 through 92 baseball and football, who not many people want or collect. So, but we sold it all, and we kept a good bit. I kept what I wanted to keep my memory of him. Like his favorite player was Duke Snider, so I kept all his Duke Sniders, and we went on from there.
So what did you start collecting when you got back into it right after you found that binder? Did you start picking up some more vintage then to add that collection? Start getting like mainly a vintage collection, or did you go into modern? Where'd you go?
Yeah, so from that I started collecting like Drew Brees, being here from New Orleans. I'm really a big soccer fan, so I started collecting soccer cards and WWE cards. And then down the road I started collecting some vintage baseball, and have gotten some of that, but sold most of it off, and gotten into more of the wrestling and football side of it.
What brought you into the 90s then? How'd you get into the 90s portion that you've been collecting lately?
So for the past year and a half, I've been collecting strictly, other than wrestling and soccer, strictly Reggie Bush. And so I've been collecting that and trying to build the best collection I can of that, and been growing that over time. And then from Stacking Slabs and Carlson Cards podcast, I would see and hear about all these great 90s sets and different things that were out there. And then I started following people like both of y'all from Brett's Patreon or from different things, and learning through different pages through Drake's PC. He's a big help with me with all my cards and learning. So I started seeing all these sets and being like, I really like the way these look, and these seem to hold their value and have a bigger trajectory to me than anything else that's out there that I can see from my research, which isn't much. And so I just started veering towards it. And one day, Saints Card Collector started talking about he was talking to a guy named Zan, and I said, "Oh, okay." And he was talking to him about some different sets, and started talking about this tier system he started seeing. And so I messaged Zan, and he sent me over this what was it on Blowout, the tier system
Yeah,
of
it's
the
an old
different
blowout thread.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I started looking at that and doing my research for about a month or two and seeing what Saints players were part of that. And at first, I wasn't really happy about it because Saints don't have too many great players 96 through 98. So got a little frustrated. But then I finally found, and I wouldn't say settled on, but I'm really happy on getting Ricky Williams. And so I started probably about a month ago now collecting Ricky Williams for 98 and 99, 99 and 2000.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I've seen you've picked up some great Williams cards that we definitely want to talk about. And so you said
Yeah,
you were collecting Breeze and Bush, and you're a Saints fan. So other than Williams, are there any particular players that you've thought about maybe getting into, or are you thinking about maybe getting into some of the Saints team sets from that time period just because Williams is only in the 99 stuff? Or are you thinking maybe even about just doing a set, that may have players from multiple teams in it?
Yeah, I started looking at some of the sets and some of the ones that Saints players were in, and I kind of have a list right here of all the Saints players that are in like 97 and 98, and it really doesn't knock you off your socks. So it's like Lorenzo Neal, Ray Zellers, Mario Bates, Tyrone Hughes, and Troy Davis. The only one that I kind of have a connection with is Danny Werfel, because he did so much for the community down here after Katrina, and in the Ninth Ward, and where I went to high school within the Ninth Ward in New Orleans. So I would be interested in maybe that down the line, but I haven't really decided on that. But yeah, the names aren't too great for the Saints. So
That's my guy, so I'm glad you brought him up. I was waiting for you to
yeah,
say him at least. You gotta mention Danny Warfel, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
great. I mean,
Brian
man,
paid
that
you to say
Florida
that.
run, yeah, that Florida run and all the stuff he's done for the city. I think I may have to pick up a card or two of his.
Before Tim Tebow, he was my all-time favorite college football player, and then Tebow came
Yeah,
around and it was over. But I mean, it's 1 and 2 for me.
yeah.
I will tell you, I've looked at when Saints card collector. What is his name, by the way? Do you know his first name? Saints
I think
card
it's
collector.
Anthony. Anthony.
Anthony. Okay. When he
Yeah,
messaged me and I was kind of going through the Saints team sets, it's there's a few teams from that time period where you're like, man, these guys sucked.
yeah, they were
I
horrible.
think it's like looking through like the Eagles team set at that time, they're pretty bad. But I'll tell you, if you could find, there was one card in there that jumped out to me. Willie Roaf does not have a lot of cards.
Mm-hmm.
Six-time All-Pro Hall of Famer. He does not have many. He has a prime choice reserve, and he's got a 97 rubies, which I have not seen, but which would be an awesome card. So if you could
Yeah,
find good Willie Roaf cards, maybe that's a guy. But again, he doesn't have too many.
they had I think it was Fred McAfee. They had a 98 rubies the other night on eBay. I was looking at, but a funny story. Another reason. I mean, I got into Ricky Williams, and so like I said, he was one of my favorite college um, players growing up, and so I rooted for him, and I wanted to get Texas stuff, even though I didn't like Texas, and still rooted for him. And then when I found out that he was coming to the Saints, I was excited because he would just run over people and just turn on the speed, and he could do it all. But my dad and my brother had Saint season tickets from when they opened up the in Tulane Stadium in New Orleans until they drafted Ricky Williams. My dad was so mad that first of all that they hired Mike Ditka, and then that they used every single draft pick on Ricky Williams. That he just said, "I've been through all the bad times, and they just gave up everything for this one guy. I'm not getting season tickets anymore." So that always kind of stuck in my mind that we stopped going to Saints games and season tickets back then, but I kept watching. I loved it so much. And I ended up getting season tickets in 2007 by myself and would bring my dad with me to to the game. So we were there through 2007 to about 2013, I believe.
I think that's
So
really cool that you started getting the Ricky Williams cards. I think if I was a Saints fan or I was thinking about getting some Ricky Williams stuff because I was going to start buying some like '90s running backs of even guys I don't collect, but just cool looking ones like Priest Holmes and Ricky Williams would be one of them. But I think with Ricky Williams, there's just not a lot of. It seems to me there's not a lot of like player collectors of him that I see a ton of. I see him more in like the team stuff. So like if you collect the Saints or something like you'd buy some of the cards, and then I see Dolphins fans that collect his stuff. But it was unique with Ricky Williams too. I remember where it was. I don't know if it was just like maybe the pressure that came on him when he came into the league with that team giving up so many draft picks and basically building their franchise around him, or the fact that we found out later that he just, he was a really calm, cool, and collected guy and thoughtful. And I don't think he like prioritized, not that he didn't try or anything I'm saying, but he didn't prioritize football like I think people thought, an athlete should. I think he kind of like down the list of things that he really cared about in life, and football was kind of like his job and a thing that he was good at, but it wasn't. He mentions later on that it wasn't my life. Like I wasn't gonna. There's a lot of other stuff I wanted to do for like, just people, humanity, whatever, myself, and just not really prioritize football and be looked at as like some type of, an item that people could own. And I think that was something different with him. And maybe that's why he doesn't have like that really, really strong, like not fans, but I mean, just that collecting base. And he's more of like a team collector guy. But
and he was interesting. I mean, he was suspended. So he wasn't in one or 2 years of cards in between. And like being in the Saints in New Orleans, it was kind of like the best and worst for him. It being such a small market, he didn't have too much like media pressure on him. But you're in a party city, and so I'm sure that didn't help out too much.
So what you've talked a little bit about how Zan helped you out, finding some information about '90s cards and that. But what are some other ways, and some of the podcasts you mentioned too, and the people. But what are some other ways, if any, that you've researched '90s and kind of fallen in line with certain players or things that you want to collect? What have you used to help yourself out early on?
The number one thing that started it all off was the Blowout Forum with the tiers of parallels. And I was able to – I said I was going to make a spreadsheet of all the Saints and figure out what Saints were in all the things, but I never did really get that far once I started looking at who exactly was in it. But it brought me down the rabbit hole of being able to see what each parallel looked like, what was available in each year, and then from there – going onto eBay and seeing kind of what the pricing is. I definitely have a limited budget, so I kind of knew the players that I wanted to be, the price range I wanted to be in and could be in. And Ricky Williams definitely fit into that. He doesn't go for an exorbitant amount. So I did that, followed a lot of people that y'all follow on Instagram. And from there, was able to see their pages and player collectors and team collectors and get to know the different sets and try to see what I liked and what would fit into my collecting lane that I wanted to be in.
Do you find that now that you've dived into 90s pretty heavily, right? And I say early 2000s because Williams is in some of those sets as well. Do you find yourself hyper focused in that particular time frame, or like if a nice Drew Brees, nice Reggie Bush, or maybe like a modern wrestling card pops up that you really want, do you feel like that would still attract you, or are you kind of really pushing yourself mostly into 90s?
No, it hasn't gotten that far yet. I still if a big Reggie Bush card pops up, I jump at that. I just got a Shield in today from 2011, Leaf certified. So I mean, if a Reggie picks up, he's my favorite player. He was my number one college player and number one Saints player growing up. So if he pops up, I get him. I'm starting to lean more and more to Ricky. I have a list of his best Saints cards and one Dolphins card that I would like to get. And so if those pop up, yeah, I jump on those immediately. Recently, I've kind of gotten above my skis and started looking at baseball because baseball was what I loved growing up, and baseball card collecting is what I loved growing up. But I'm just not ready for that. I need to focus on this and play this out and see how it goes, and then down the line collect some baseball.
Well,
What's nice about that though too, they have the night they have a lot of the nice team sets, or a lot of the nice parallels being the same in football and baseball, so you can kind of figure stuff out here and then bounce over to baseball. Maybe it'll give you some time to find a player that's affordable and you want to get into. So that's the nice part about focusing on one sport first.
Oh yeah, I've definitely started that. I started making a list of affordable players I know that I love that'll be way too much, and then players of that I really liked growing up that probably are right in my budget and wheelhouse. That even if I stretched a little bit, it wouldn't be too bad. But that'll be a little ways from now.
Well, we don't want to send you down that road just yet because it's an expensive one. But let's say you were to get into baseball. Who are some of the players or teams maybe? Who is your team, and who are some of the players that you might like?
Yeah, so my team now is since high school is the Red Sox. My team growing up was Boston. Team growing up was the Braves. All my mom's family lived in Atlanta, so we'd go there every summer and go to games and do everything with them. And so I was the perfect age, 92 and all that, when they were going to the World Series or the playoffs every year. So we'd go up there and have fun all the time.
So I'm looking through your page. I looked at it a couple days ago and then again just right now, but you got some of your recent pickups that you've posted on here from the 90s are really cool. We talked about them a little bit before we started recording here, but you want to talk about a few of your favorite pickups of these 90s cards?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first one that I got was this 1999 Bowman Best Atomic Refractor PSA 9. Just love the shine
Beautiful
on that and how it just glows everywhere. This one I got from Junk Wax Drake, the 2000 EX Essential Credentials Now out of 50. And it goes great with that gold with the Saints colors.
Yeah, that's great.
So I was able to pick that up and got to talk to him for a little while, and he collects some Ricky Williams and some 90s cards, so that was great to connect with him. Then I have the 2000 Skybox Extreme Ruby. I think that's what that's called.
Yeah. Star Ruby's Extreme.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's Extreme. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an underrated Ruby set too. Just it doesn't give as much love, but I think it's just a really cool looking card. Great design.
It is.
Yeah.
It's really nice. It's so hard to tell even in this thing, but once you get it in the light, it goes really crazy. Let's see if I can get this thing out.
Show us the big one here.
Yeah, and then this one, the 1999 Meta Universe PMG.
Woo!
Right there.
Wow. That's
my favorite. That's what I mentioned before. I mean, even if I'm not a Ricky Williams collector at all, like I think that card's awesome.
Yeah, it's so great.
Really sharp.
But I kind of started researching it, and I started talking to Drake Magruder a little bit about it, and he helps me out with Card Ladder and a few other things that I don't have, and which I need to probably get soon. And he was telling this card hasn't sold publicly in 5 years. So it's like, it's there. I need to get it. They're only going to go up. Now's the time.
Yeah, that's the problem. When you get in the 90s and you're talking to someone like Drake or me or Brian we're always bad influences. It's never like, no, you shouldn't buy that. It's always like, you need to get it. You're never going to have another chance.
You may need to hold off. I don't know if you'll have time.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing with that card too is I know we talked a little bit before we got on air here about the college uniform thing, and I'm not crazy about college uniform stuff. There's certain cards I collect in college uniform, like with my Gators stuff, or
Yeah.
I have a like I would get Charles Woodson because I loved him in college. But I think there's something to be said about like these iconic college football players that also were like really good NFL players too. And if they're in a college uniform, it's like you remember them just as much in that college uniform as you do like in the NFL, and it kind of blends together for me. So like seeing that Ricky Williams um in that uniform, like it wouldn't bother me one bit. It'd be like if a Charles Woodson was in his Michigan uniform right there, or even
Right.
like with Randy Moss and Marshall. Like you just remember these iconic players and those seasons right before they came in the league with all that hype and that card's just beautiful. That gold background with the white and the orange. I mean, it's unbelievable card.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. It has jumped up to one of my top cards in my entire collection. Like I said, just the fact that I followed him and I was the perfect age and the same age as him pretty much at that time. And so it was just, it was everything that I wanted in a card.
Yeah, that's a fantastic looking card. And like you said, you've got your biggest one on the way. So everybody, make sure you follow Matt on Instagram so you can see what he unveils. Matt, before we let you go, since you are just breaking into 90s, what any tips, advice that you have for collectors like yourself who have been collecting and know about cards generally, but maybe you want to make a change or want to break into the 90s?
Yeah, I mean, just find something you love. Find players that you love, players that you grew up with and couldn't keep your eyes off of. Um, players for me that like on my mind: Ricky Williams, Calvin Johnson, Barry Sanders. Those are probably more high end. But I mean, so find your budget that you want to be in and the lane that you want to be in, or your sports, and then follow people on Instagram or Twitter or X, and that have that same philosophy and same collection that you want to grow, and see the sets out there and see what they look like. Look them up on eBay. Look at the price point. See what you would be comfortable with. Um, do your research. There's a lot of tools out there. These guys right here will definitely help you out with whatever you need. I trust me. I've asked Zan a million questions, and never once has he not answered or say I'm too busy. Um, so yeah, ask a lot of questions, research. It's your money, so you need to put it into what you like and what what you're going to have fun growing.
Great advice, Matt. Thanks so much for joining us. And we'll definitely have you on down the line to kind of see how your
Yeah,
90s collection has changed.
yeah, absolutely. Maybe in a year or so, I can show you my top 10.
Absolutely. All right,
Yeah,
Matt. Take care.
Thanks a
thank
lot,
you.
Matt.
Thank you.
Hope that was enlightening for everyone. Thank you so much to Matt for joining us and taking us through his recent experience with 90s cards. I'm sure he won't be the last guest that we have on that is just starting out into 90s cards, because I think that's always valuable information for everyone. Take a look at the premiere auction if you're listening to this on Thursday, ending tonight. We will see where that Peyton Manning Series 2 masterpiece ends up. We've got some interesting shows lined up, got some new guests, some new sets to discuss over the next few weeks. So we hope that you will join us, and we will catch you next week.